The night was a total wash, gloomy and rainy, the kind of weather where the neon from the roadside signs bleeds across the wet asphalt in dismal, blurry patches. My wipers were lazily batting droplets across the windshield, and the radio was just mumbling some lo-fi filler to kill the silence. It was just another shift in my illustrious career as a rideshare driver. Nothing new. I'd only been driving in this city for a short time, but I'd already learned the drill. After 11 p.m., you're mostly just hauling drunks home from the bars. But on this particular night, orders were dead. I was about to call it a night and head home when my headlights caught a silhouette up ahead. Standing on the shoulder was a girl, a thin figure in a dark hoodie, the hood pulled low over her face. She raised her hand, flagging me down. I figured, what the hell? I'll take this one last fare and then finally hit the rack. The girl didn't look wasted. On the contrary, she looked lost and defenseless, standing all alone in the middle of a soaked road. The only weird thing was, why didn't she just ping a ride through the app? Anyway, I wasn't complaining. Cash is king, and this meant I'd keep the whole cut without any commissions. I slowed down and pulled up next to her, rolling down the window. She didn't lean in to talk like passengers usually do. She just opened the back door and slid inside without a word. Strange, but you see all kinds of freaks on the graveyard shift. I decided to break the awkwardness. "Good evening. Where are we heading?" I asked. She didn't rush to answer. She just shifted slightly on the seat. In the rearview mirror, her face was a total eclipse. The shadow of the hood was blocking everything. I was just about to repeat the question when a quiet voice spoke.
"To the old subdivision, please."
Her words gave me instant goosebumps. For a second, I just sat there, staring into the darkness. The old subdivision was a place called the Pines, and it was a local legend for all the wrong reasons. I'd moved here recently, but I'd already heard the rumors about that failed gated community. Back in the day, they were supposed to build these elite, spacious McMansions right on the edge of the forest. A dream home. The construction was almost finished, but a few months before the grand opening, the whole project went south. The investors vanished, the crews walked off, and the heavy machinery was left to rust right on the lots. People whispered that an entire work crew, 6 men, had disappeared on that site. The locals swore the workers were walled up inside one of the houses. Nobody ever found any remains, but people claimed that at night, you could hear voices and knocking coming from the walls of the abandoned houses. Whether it was true or just urban legend, the fact remained. The Pines was left to rot. Now, it was just a landmark for bored teenagers and thrill seekers. So, when she gave me that address, my first thought was, no way she has a vacation home out there. The second was, what the hell is she doing at a dead-end tract like that? "You sure?" I asked cautiously. "I mean, I thought that place was a ghost town." The girl turned her head slightly, and even though I couldn't see her face, I felt her eyes burning into the back of my head. It made my skin crawl, and I quickly looked away.
"Yes, I'm sure,"
she whispered, almost to herself.
"They're waiting for me. Will 200 do?"
I was floored. That was triple the usual fare. Plus, I'd been dry all night and hadn't made a dime. A bonus like that was hard to pass up, even if I had to drive back empty. I shrugged and nodded, putting the car in gear. But one thing kept gnawing at me. Why there? I tried to convince myself it was some kind of underground rave or a themed party in the ruins. Kids are into that creepy stuff these days. Maybe she was just a late guest? But honestly, that thought didn't settle my stomach. Sighing, I flicked on the blinker and pulled away, leaving the cozy glow of the city lights for the pitch-black back roads. In the rear view, her face stayed hidden in the shadows, and for a second, I really regretted not just driving past her. The drive should have taken about 30 minutes. The whole time I kept checking the mirror out of the corner of my eye. She sat there like a statue. I started feeling twitchy from the silence, so I tried to lighten the mood. "You headed to a party? Some kind of pop-up event? Maybe I should join you?" She didn't even flinch. Come on, girl, give me a smile. Why so gloomy? A pretty girl like you. She shifted. She turned her head slightly and hissed.
Just drive, please.
I shut up and gripped the wheel. Silent passengers are one thing, but that sounded sharp, almost like a threat. In the mirror, her silhouette flashed again, and I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Her reflection looked blurry, smudged, like it was glitching or vibrating. I whipped my head around to look at her, but she looked perfectly normal. Sharp silhouette, damp hoodie. I turned back to the road, trying to convince myself it was just the rain on the glass. The further we got from the city, the more the road fell apart. The asphalt turned into a dirt track full of potholes. The forest closed in. Heavy, wet branches hanging over us like claws. It felt like we were driving through a tunnel of shadows. I reached out to crank the radio just to drown out the anxiety, but all I got was dead air and static. I clicked it off and stole one more glance at her. She had turned toward the window, and I finally caught her profile. A lone, flickering street lamp flashed across her face, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. The girl didn't have a left eye. In its place was a void, a dark, hollowed-out socket. My heart hammered against my ribs. I instinctively looked away, a wave of cold panic washing over me. Calm down, I told myself. Maybe it was an accident, or a birth defect. Don't be a jerk. But a voice in my head was screaming, "Get her out of the car and get back to the city now." Listen, my voice was shaking. The road's completely washed out up ahead. Maybe I can drop you here? You're almost there anyway. She didn't turn. She just said, flat and cold.
Keep driving.
A shiver ran down my spine. A few more agonizing minutes, and the trees opened up. The pines. I knew it the second I saw it. Abandoned luxury shells stood everywhere, with dead, empty windows and collapsing fences. Against the stormy sky, they looked like row after row of gray ghosts. The girl slowly raised her hand, pointing to one of the houses.
Right here.
I pulled over onto the weedy shoulder. The house she pointed to looked like it had been rotting since the dawn of time. The siding was peeling, the windows were gaping black holes, and the roof was sagging under the weight of moss and dead leaves. The trees leaned so low, it looked like they were trying to swallow the place whole. I stared at her as she took her time opening the door. Who could possibly be waiting for her here? Looking at that lopsided wreck, I knew the answer was nobody. She slipped out, closed the door, and leaned toward the window.
Wait for me.
No, that wasn't the deal.
Just a few minutes.
Then I need the cash up front. She gave me a long, haunting stare from under the hood. Then, she reached into her sweatshirt, pulled out a gold chain, and handed it to me. She said it was a deposit, then turned and walked away before I could get a word in. She headed straight for the house with a light, confident stride. Every step she took made my stomach turn. Something bad was coming. I knew it. She disappeared through the crooked front door. I kept the engine running and turned the car around, just in case. I locked the doors. I'd heard stories about lure robberies, drivers being led into the middle of nowhere to get jumped. Were her friends waiting inside? I sat there, listening to the rain, staring into the dark. Something was wrong. Not just the house or the girl, but something deeper. The longer I sat there, the more the terror took hold. I was shaking. It was a primal fear, the kind that tells you to run or die. Something is wrong here. I can feel it in my bones. I need to leave. I looked at the clock. 10 minutes. If I left her, I was an asshole. But if I stayed, I looked at the house. No way I was going in there. My survival instinct was screaming. Screw this, I muttered. I was about to floor it when the engine suddenly died. I yanked the key, but there was nothing. No crank, no click. Total silence. It was like someone had snipped the wires. What the hell? I growled. I tried again and again, but the car was a brick. Reluctantly, I hopped out to check under the hood. The night air hit me like a wet blanket, and a thick, patchy fog was crawling across the grass. I popped the hood and flicked on my phone's flashlight, but the darkness seemed to soak up the light. I had no idea what was wrong with the engine. What am I even doing? I thought, staring at the motor. I slammed the hood shut and checked my phone. No service. Of course, I groaned. Not a single bar in this hellhole. I looked back at the house, and that's when it hit me. Not a single light had flickered inside. No flashlight, no phone screen, nothing. How was she moving around in there? It was pitch black. Suddenly, a scream ripped through the air, high-pitched, thin, and full of pure agony. My fear turned into a jolt of adrenaline. She was in trouble. I couldn't just leave her. I ran to the trunk, fumbled around, and grabbed the first heavy thing I could find, a tire iron, and charged toward the porch. The scream came again, louder. I burst through the front door, the wood groaning on its hinges. I took one step inside, and the floorboard creaked like a gunshot. I froze, breathing in the stale, moldy air. "Hey, are you okay? Where are you?" I called out. No answer, only my own echo. My flashlight beam danced over peeling wallpaper and thick cobwebs. Then, the light hit the wall. Dark, uneven stains. It looked like blood. Every nerve in my body told me to run, but I couldn't move. I heard a muffled groan from below. The basement. I didn't think. I rushed to the basement door, threw it open, and practically flew down the stairs. The steps were thick with dust. My head started to feel heavy, dizzy. I felt like I was going to pass out. The world around me started to warp. The walls began to change. The peeling paint became fresh and bright. The dust vanished. Suddenly, the basement smelled like sawdust and new construction. A long, heavy screech echoed. The sound of something massive being dragged across the floor. I stood frozen on the stairs. Footsteps were coming. A woman's sob turned into a groan, and then a deep, gruff male voice barked, "Shut up." A man appeared in the doorway, broad-shouldered, tall. He was dragging something. My heart stopped. It was her, the girl from my car. He was dragging her by her hair, ignoring her screams. "Hey, let her go!" I yelled, lunging at him. But my hand went right through his shoulder like he was made of smoke. I wasn't there. I was a ghost watching a memory. The girl fought back, but it was useless. He threw her onto the concrete floor. The man hit her hard. She screamed, covering her face, but that only made him more vicious. He grabbed the gold chain around her neck, the same one she gave me, and started to choke her. Then he pulled a knife. "Look at me. Look!" he roared. "You didn't even look at me when you got in the car. You didn't even look when I said you were beautiful. Well, you're gonna look now." He grabbed her chin, forcing her eyes open. The knife glinted. "Here's a lesson for you, so you never look down on guys like me again." And then, I saw it. The knife touched her face. Everything went into slow motion. He forced her eye open, and with sadistic precision, he carved it out. Her scream exploded in my head. I heard the sound of something wet hitting the floor. The man stepped on it, grinding it into the concrete. I wanted to scream. I wanted to puke, but I was paralyzed. He stood up, cold and indifferent, looking down at her as she bled out on the floor. "Nobody will find you here," he spat. He turned and walked back up the stairs. Silence returned, broken only by her ragged breathing. She lay there alone in the dark, dying. I felt a deathly cold rising in my chest. I couldn't take my eyes off her body. Suddenly, a voice whispered right in my ear.
It was raining that night too. He was a driver. He offered me a lift. He didn't ask for much.
I spun around. She was standing an inch away from me. The hood, the missing eye, the black void. She had a ghastly smirk on her face. I'm not him, I stammered, backing away. I turned and bolted for the stairs. I hammered on the door, screaming, but it wouldn't budge. It was like it was part of the wall. Footsteps sounded behind me, slow, heavy, confident. I was trapped. I wasn't locked in with a girl. I was locked in with a wraith that wanted revenge on anyone who looked like the man who took her life. "Please, I didn't do anything," I screamed. But her cold hand gripped my shoulder with fingers like steel. My strength drained away. Her cold breath burned my ear as she whispered the last thing I'd ever hear.
Nobody will find you here.
Late that night, another driver was cruising the highway. A young guy, tired, and ready for his shift to end. It was raining. The radio was low. Suddenly, a news bulletin broke through. Police are continuing the search for a missing rideshare driver whose vehicle was found abandoned near the Pines development. No signs of a struggle were found. This is the third disappearance in the area in 6 months. Motorists are advised not to stop for hitchhikers on this stretch of road. The driver snorted and turned it down. Man, these urban legends are getting wild. Just don't pick up sketchy people. Simple as that. Suddenly, his headlights caught a figure on the shoulder. A girl, wet, thin, with a hood pulled low. She raised her hand. The driver slowed down, squinting. He cracked the window and yelled, "Hey, gorgeous, don't get soaked. Hop in, I'll give you a lift." Ladies and gentlemen, we hope your flight with us today will be smooth and pleasant. The chime faded. I snapped my eyes open. Smooth? Yeah, right. The seats were built for hobbits. The cabin was stifling, and we were packed in like sardines. The snacks were supposed to be out an hour ago. Never again. I am done with this airline. I was on a red-eye from JFK to Denver to see my folks. Haven't seen them in 5 years. Not since I moved to the East Coast and got swallowed by the New York rat race. How's it going, bro? Hey son, we miss you. Don't let that big city life make you forget where you came from. My friends and parents kept blowing up my phone with texts like that. But what could I do? Work. Always the damn work. It sucks the life right out of you. Finally, I took my first real PTO in years and headed home. The guys had it all mapped out. Fishing at the lake, hiking the trails, backyard BBQs with ribeyes and cold beers. Just like the old days. Man, I missed those guys. And my parents were starting to show their age. Last time we talked, Mom wouldn't stop crying. She kept saying she had a bad feeling about this trip. I've always been a wreck when it comes to flying. Total aerophobia. Plus, being 6'3", a coach cabin is a literal hell for someone my size. I'd been rotting in this seat for 3 hours. My luck with the booking was just as bad. I checked in early for a window, but the system glitched. They handed me a boarding pass for 34E. I immediately pictured myself wedged between 2 strangers for 4 hours. Since I'm a big guy, every seat feels like a straitjacket, so 34E was a total setup. I tried to pull Karen at the gate, but the agent just shrugged. So I spent the last 3 hours in the very back, listening to the vacuum flush of the lavatory and catching occasional whiffs of things I'd rather not describe. To my left, a mom was struggling with a toddler who screamed like he was being possessed while kicking my shin. To my right, a guy was snoring like a chainsaw. The only upside was the snoring occasionally muffled the kid. But eventually, the noise just fused into one massive, throbbing migraine. Suddenly, mid-tantrum, the kid went dead silent. He stared right into my soul. For a second, I thought he was about to drop some wisdom, but then he just shoved a finger up his nose, dug around, and wiped the prize on the sleeve of my Brooks Brothers blazer. That was it. I lost it. I stood up, jarring the snoring guy awake without a word, and shoved past. Near the galley, I ripped the curtain back and stepped into the flight attendant's station. One of them was sitting there, frantically twisting her silk scarf. Her movements were twitchy, manic. Her breathing was ragged, making this wet, clicking sound in her chest. Was she sick? Just what I needed, to catch some bug midair. I gave a dry cough. "Excuse me? How much longer until we start our descent? And why hasn't the cart come around yet?" Nothing. She just sat there, staring at me with a frozen plastic smile. "Do you have some Advil or something? My head is splitting." Same smile. Glassy eyes, zero response. "Ma'am? Are you okay? Can you even hear me? Is there another lead on this flight?" She just kept staring like a department store mannequin. Weird. Was she part of some inclusive hiring program? I gave up and went to find someone else. Someone had to explain this BS. I headed toward first class. The moment I stepped out, the floor dropped. The plane began to shake violently. But the fastened seatbelt sign stayed dark. No announcement. Just light turbulence, I lied to myself. But my body wasn't buying the lie. I broke out in a cold sweat. My hands were shaking. The headache was pulsing like a strobe light. I needed to find someone. Anyone. Why are we bouncing? Where is the crew? Why haven't we even gotten a soda? This wasn't just a budget airline being cheap anymore. Something was wrong. Are we going down? Did we lose an engine? I've seen enough air crash investigation to know the signs. My mind went to the dark places, crashing into the Rockies. Fire. The smell of burning jet fuel and scorched skin. No yellow mask was going to save us from a mountain. I pushed forward, fighting the turbulence. In row 32, a woman held a teenager on her lap. The kid had to be 14. He was perfectly still, skin the color of wet cement. The mother was rocking him like an infant, humming a lullaby while tears soaked her collar. Was he terminal? I told myself I'd check on them later. In row 20, a guy in a military dress uniform sat like a statue, hands on knees, shoulders back. As I passed, the plane took a hard dip and I stumbled. He turned his head and I nearly choked. The left side of his face was a sagging, melted mess, like a wax figure left in the sun. But the right side was crisp and clean. He looked at me with that one functional eye and said nothing. I moved fast. My head felt like someone was using an ice pick on it. I was nauseous. During another jolt, I almost went down. I saw an empty seat and crashed into it. "Make yourself at home," the woman next to me said. "It's my husband's seat, but he stepped out. Pretty sure he's not coming back." Wicked sense of humor. "Funny," I gasped. "Just staying until the air clears up." "Oh, honey, I love the company. Honestly, I've been starving for some real talk. What's your name? What do you do for a living?" "I'm Paul, corporate lawyer." "Why starving? We've only been in the air a few hours." She let out a sharp laugh. "Lawyer, smart guy. I was a trauma surgeon before all this." Then her face went hollow. "But I'm here now. Can't fix anyone anymore." She gestured to the cabin. "Why not? Actually, I could use a hand. Got any aspirin?" She laughed again, patting my arm. "You're a riot. I like that in a man. Stop by again. I'm Anna, by the way." I gave a weak nod and kept moving. Total nutcase. I kept going and saw something that stopped me cold in row 15. A girl, maybe middle school age, had blood gushing from her nose. She was just smiling, looking at the seat back in front of her. "Hey, you're bleeding," I said, reaching for a napkin. "Are you okay? Do you need a medic?" She turned, and it wasn't just her nose. Blood was leaking from her ears, too. staining her jeans.
It's just the cabin pressure.
She said, grinning.
Have you seen my dad? Dad! Daddy!
She started screaming. People started shushing me. Me? Like I was the one bothering her. Somebody help her. Kid, where's your dad? Did he go to the head? Let's find him. But she lost it. Thrashing, spraying blood, screaming in a voice that sounded like grinding metal.
Daddy!
Why are you people just sitting there? She's bleeding out. A woman in the next row hissed at me to keep it down. Screw this, I whispered. Hang on, kid. I'm getting the captain. I'll find him. I sprinted toward the front. Why was everyone so cold? Like this was a daily commute to hell. My own head was vibrating. Black spots were everywhere. I couldn't breathe. Then the lights went black. This is it. We're going into the ground. My family will never get closure. I started hyperventilating. At least I don't have to deal with the partners at the firm anymore. I realized I was cracking up. The plane took a massive hit. I went flying, face planting into someone's lap. No one moved. No one screamed. When I tried to push off, my hand sank into something wet and stringy. In the red glow of the exit signs, I saw her. The girl I'd landed on had her abdomen torn open. Her insides were draped over the armrests. The guy next to her was missing his left arm, dark sludge pooling on the floor. I couldn't move. But then the lights kicked back on. The plane smoothed out. In front of me was a pregnant lady and a guy holding her hand, both perfectly fine. Sorry, tripped. Bad turbulence, I stammered. The woman looked right through me. I kept walking, my brain misfiring. Hallucinations. It had to be the migraine.
Hey, sweetie, help an old lady out. My hands aren't what they used to be.
I turned. An old woman in a tattered cardigan and a headscarf sat there. She looked like she belonged in a 1950s farmhouse, not a Boeing. White things were scattered all over the carpet. I got it, ma'am. Stay put. The shaking was brutal. No wonder you dropped your pills. I reached down. They weren't pills. They were teeth. Human teeth, roots and all.
Don't you worry, honey. One more, one less. I've seen worse.
She croaked. She leaned in. Her mouth was a dark, toothless pit. She smelled like wet earth and formaldehyde. I scrambled away on my hands and knees. This isn't a flight, it's a nightmare. I have to get to the cockpit. Now, I checked my watch. We were an hour past our ETA for Denver, but we weren't descending. We were just hanging there in the sky. Was the airport fogged in? Did the pilot pass out? Are we just burning fuel until we drop into the mountains? I ripped through the first-class curtain. The guy in 1A had his throat slit from ear to ear. Blood was everywhere, but he was just swiping on his phone. The blonde next to him had a piece of rebar through her chest, but she was busy reapplying her lipstick in a compact. It's a prank, a sick prank, I lied to myself. Then I saw the kids, 3 boys and a girl. No hair. Their skin was charred black, peeling off in strips. Their clothes were melted into their flesh. One of them winked at me with his one good eye. "Hey, mister," he whispered. "Coach was full, so they put us here. Don't snitch on us, okay? We aren't supposed to be here." I felt the bile hit my throat. I ran to the cockpit door and started pounding. "Open up! What is this? Help me!" "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," the intercom hissed. Thank God, a real voice. Please remain calm and stay in your seats. Due to some technical issues and weather, we are initiating an emergency descent. Everything is under control. Please stay seated. In the background of the mic, a pull-up alarm was screaming. The plane tilted at a 45-degree angle. I slammed into the wall. The audio cut, but the passengers? They didn't care. Same old script, the guy with the cut throat muttered. "Yep, 8th time tonight," the blonde sighed. The masks dropped. No one grabbed them. They just pushed them away like cobwebs. 8th time? We are dying. What's the matter with you? I grabbed my head. My fingers hit something wet. Not blood. Thicker. I felt the back of my skull. It wasn't there. There was just a crater of bone shards and gray matter. And then, the curtain of my mind finally ripped open. The turbulence, the sound of the wing snapping, the screams as the cabin depressurized, the girl's father being sucked out into the night, the flight attendant getting impaled, the fire, the plane shakes, the screech of metal. The skin is buckling inward. Debris destroys everyone on the left side. A little girl calls for her dad before he is crushed by the structure. A flight attendant tries to help until an iron rod pierces her throat. The officer, Anna. I remembered the smell of the upholstery melting. I remembered the kids screaming as the fuel tank ignited. I remembered the impact against the side of the mountain. And then, the void. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope your flight with us today will be
Yesterday was the last day of normal life. For me, and probably for billions of people. I never thought that all the comforts we lived with would suddenly become useless. The smartphones, the high-speed internet, the nice suburban houses, the SUVs, all the fruits of civilization just stopped mattering. I didn't know it was coming. Nobody knew. And because of that, nobody was prepared. I'm writing this in a notebook that's almost out of pages. I hope the next generation finds this, if there even is one, so they know what happened on this God-forsaken earth. My name is Jack. I'm 30 years old. I had a family, 2 kids, and a house in a nice subdivision. The mortgage was almost paid off. I lived in a small town called Clarion, a quiet place not far from the state border. Life followed a simple routine. Home, work, kids. Everything was normal until that one horrific moment. It was our last normal evening. We were sitting in the living room, eating snacks and looking for something to stream. The movies were all garbage, so we just left the news on mute in the background. Suddenly, an emergency alert system tone blared through the speakers. My wife grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Satellites had detected massive explosions at nuclear sites across Europe. Then another update came in. Right here in Michigan, there had been a catastrophic accident at several ICBM silos. Major technical failures were also reported at power plants across the country. It was just after 9 p.m. The news anchor was frantic, rambling about terrorist attacks, cyber warfare, and nuclear meltdowns. I stopped listening to her and looked at my wife. She looked paralyzed. My kids had no idea what was going on. Half of my brain was screaming that we needed to prepare for the end of the world. The other half was desperately trying to believe it was all a mistake. The reports kept coming. Berlin, Paris, London. More explosions at nuclear plants and missile sites. Then they showed the footage. Panicking crowds, fire, National Guard in hazmat suits. I walked to the window. Everything outside looked the same. Cars were driving down the street. People were walking their dogs. Porch lights were glowing. Let's just go to sleep, I told my wife. Tomorrow we'll know more. It's probably some glitch. I mean, nuclear sites don't just explode all over the world at once, right? I was raising my voice, almost shouting. But she just shrugged. I could see the pure terror in her eyes. We couldn't sleep. Once my head was a mess. I kept thinking FEMA would help us. that they'd evacuate the county, I kept telling myself it wasn't real. During the night, my phone was blowing up with amber-style alerts. I was so exhausted that I just turned it off and shoved it under my pillow. That's the one thing I'll always regret. When I woke up, I turned the phone on. 10 emergency alerts from the government. Nuclear alert. Gather essentials. Prepare for immediate evacuation to the nearest shelter. The panic hit me like a physical blow. Everything inside me tightened. I looked at my wife, still sleeping in our white sheets. "Wake up! Get up now!" I yelled. "Something happened. Pack the kids, grab the go bags. We have 30 minutes. We grabbed our IDs, cash, food, and water. We sat in the living room and waited for a siren or a knock at the door. My wife tried the TV, but the screen was just static. No signal at all, even though the power was still on. Outside, the sky was a sickly, dark gray. There was no sun, just heavy black clouds or thick smoke. People were flooding the streets with backpacks, all heading toward the town square. We waited for hours. 1 hour, 2. No FEMA buses arrived. No military trucks. Nothing. The only thing that changed was the light. By 2 p.m., it was as dark as 9 p.m. People started hot wiring cars and leaving on their own. Panic finally broke me when I felt it. That metallic taste in my mouth. "We're leaving," I said. "We need to find a storm cellar or just drive." I knew the invisible enemy was already eating us from the inside. "Wrap yourselves in towels. Use those N95 masks from the garage," I ordered. My wife put masks on the kids and wrapped a scarf around her face. I did the same. When we stepped outside, the town square was a nightmare. People who'd been waiting for the buses were vomiting blood. Some were twitching on the pavement, choking on their own insides. It was horrific. I grabbed my family and jumped into the nearest car. An old Ford. I didn't have the owner's permission, but when you're dying, you learn how to hotwire real fast.
"Stop! That's my car."
A man staggered toward us, coughing violently. Dark, almost black blood was leaking from his mouth.
"Please, take me with you. I don't want to die here."
I knew if we took him, we'd all be dead. I knocked him out, grabbed the keys from his pocket, and got in. "Hope you don't wake up, man," I whispered. I think I was doing him a favor. The sky grew even darker. I had to turn on the high beams. The roads were littered with bodies and abandoned SUVs. I stopped at a local Walmart and ran inside. People were in the aisles, begging for help, their throats raw from coughing. I couldn't do anything. I just grabbed canned goods and cases of water and ran back to the car. We drove toward the county line. I wondered how the fallout got to us so fast. History books said people had time during old disasters. Now, it hadn't even been 24 hours and the radiation was off the charts. The birds were the worst part. Dead birds were everywhere. Thousands of them covering the highway. Suddenly I heard a cough from the back seat. Sam, my youngest. He was coughing hard, and I saw a small red stain blooming on his mask. I pulled over near a state park. The air felt a bit cleaner there, away from the city. I checked my phone. The 5G was still barely hanging on. The news was an apocalypse. More explosions. Millions dead. Pictures of people literally melting. I closed the browser. I couldn't let my wife see that. Sam was getting worse. Every time he coughed, it felt like a needle in my heart. I tried to find the name of any medicine that could help, but my phone died. I was too weak to keep driving. I pulled the car deep into the woods and turned off the engine. "Let's just sleep for an hour," I said, leaning against the steering wheel. I passed out instantly. I woke up 5 hours later in total darkness. The woods were silent. I started the engine and turned on the brights. I didn't know it then, but the sun was gone for good. In the sky there was no moon, no stars, just a black void. It was almost noon. I was driving, leading my family through the gloom in a desperate search for a shelter and a pharmacy. Sam was getting worse. My wife, Sarah, was exhausted. She'd cried until she had no tears left. I kept gripping the steering wheel, wondering why we were still alive. Maybe the masks and towels actually worked. But that copper taste was still there. I should be a corpse by now, but I was still breathing. We all were, except for Sam. Before my phone died, I'd written down names of medicines. Iodine, radiation blockers, the basics. The sun never came back. The sky was wrapped in a suffocating black shroud, and it was starting to get cold. We hadn't seen a single car or a single living soul on the road. The air felt fresh but eerily still. No wind at all. The wind is what carries the fallout, and without it, maybe we had a chance. An hour later, I saw buildings on the horizon. I floored it. The gas gauge was hugging empty. We entered a small town called Oakhaven. People here were walking around like nothing was wrong. Some looked anxious, but they were smiling. They thought it wouldn't reach them. Naive. It's going to reach every last soul. I pulled up to a CVS. Sarah and the kids were asleep in the back, so I slipped out quietly. The bell chimed as I walked in. A young intern named Andrew greeted me. I rattled off the list of meds. He came back looking confused. We only have 1 pack of potassium iodide left. But do you actually believe the stuff on the news? I snapped. I grabbed him by his clean white coat. Listen to me, kid. My son is dying in that car. I watched my entire hometown drop dead in front of me. Pack your things and get out of here before this town becomes a graveyard. Andrew just stared at me, trembling. Is it really that bad? Extremely bad. Now, can you help my son or not? Andrew had been a med student. He followed me to the car and touched Sam's forehead. He's burning up. He needs fever reducers now. He ran back inside, then stopped, dead on the sidewalk, staring at the sky. The black shroud was crawling over the horizon from the west. Andrew, gather every pill and bandage you can find. You're coming with us. We hit the local high school next. Andrew knew the way to the basement where they kept the old emergency gear. We found vintage rubber gas masks and a few hazmat suits. We took 5 masks and all the spare filters we could carry. When we got back to the car, it was pitch black. The cloud had swallowed Oakhaven. I hit the highway driving fast. Where to? Andrew asked, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. We need a bunker, something underground. Sam woke up for a moment. Andrew checked him. His temperature's down. He's stable for now. 10 miles later, I started to drift off. I was exhausted. I pulled into a state park trail and turned off the engine. Everyone put on the suits. Keep the masks ready. Andrew, stay on watch. I leaned my head on the wheel and fell into a deep sleep. I woke up to a horrific shriek from Andrew. It was dark. I looked into the back seat and my blood ran cold. It wasn't Sam anymore. His limbs were twisting and snapping with a sickening crunch. His skin was a mottled, bruised gray. Blood was streaming from his clouded eyes. He was growling, a sound no human child should ever make. Then I looked at Sarah and Leo. They were wearing their masks, but blood was dripping from the filters. The glass eyepieces were filled with deep, dark red. I scrambled out of the car, screaming. The thing that used to be my son crawled out on all fours. It looked at me, then sprinted into the woods, and it flew. It just took off into the air. Andrew was standing there, paralyzed. I had lost everything. My wife, my children. I would have ended it right there if Andrew hadn't grabbed me. We have to go. Put the mask on. We pulled the bodies out of the car and left them there. No time for a funeral. I started the engine, and the headlights cut through the dark. Dozens of them were swarming the car, creatures with rotting faces and multiple arms. I floored it, feeling the thuds as the car hit them. We drove until the road ended at a concrete structure with a heavy steel hatch. We climbed down into the underground tunnels. It looked like an old military bunker from the Cold War. We found an office with an old flag on the wall and dusty furniture. I dropped my bag and took off the mask. The air was stale and cold, but it was clean. I sat on the floor, closed my eyes, and let the darkness take me. Bunker was damp. Extremely damp. There were woodlice and other insects crawling everywhere. I couldn't sleep for long because the sound of dripping water in the corridor was driving me crazy. It was freezing too, a cold that bit straight to the bone. We had nothing to warm us up. The only option was to siphoning some gas from the car, but that meant going outside. Neither I nor Andrew wanted to do that. Not yet. We weren't afraid of the radiation anymore. The suits protected us. We were afraid of those things. Images of Sarah and the kids kept flashing in my mind. I tried to think about anything else, but their faces were always there, staring back at me. I didn't want to eat or drink. I didn't even want to stand up from that frozen concrete floor. Andrew was curled up in a corner, sleeping like a baby. The room was pitch black. No flashlights left. Just a couple of lighters and Andrew's dead phone. I sat there for hours, losing all track of time. Finally, I decided to explore. I needed to know if there was anything useful in this hole. I pushed open the heavy iron door and stepped into the main corridor. In one of the side rooms, my lighter caught something on the floor. An empty tin can, an old kerosene lamp, and a clump of gray fur. The can had a faded logo on it. Looked like old military rations. The scary part was that someone had eaten from it recently. If it had been here since the war, the can would be dust. But there were fresh food scraps inside. I picked up the lamp. There was a tiny bit of fuel left. I lit it, and the room filled with a dim, flickering glow. I felt a small spark of hope, or maybe just a distraction from the grief. I kept walking until I hit a massive, rusted steel door with a circular crank. It looked like time had sealed it forever. I turned back and went to find Andrew. He woke up with a start, looking terrified. "Don't sneak up on me like that," he muttered. He'd become the only person in the world I could count on. "Andrew, I found something. Someone else was here, recently." He stood up fast. "That's not funny, Jack. If someone's down here, we need to find them before they find us." We grabbed some heavy pipes I found in the corner and headed back into the corridor. But as soon as we turned the corner, the lamp began to flicker. Then it went out. "Damn it," I hissed. We had to crawl back to our room in the dark, nearly on our hands and knees. Andrew started to panic. "We're trapped, Jack. We have food and water for a few days, but then what? We're just waiting to die." "Shut up," I snapped. "Panicking like a coward won't save us. We're going back up." We needed fuel for the lamp. We put on the gas masks, grabbed a hose from the trunk, and climbed the ladder. I pushed the hatch open. The same suffocating absolute darkness greeted us outside. I ran to our car, the old Ford. I froze. The car was wrecked. It looked like something had flipped it over and over, smashing it like a toy. The gas tank was ruptured. No fuel. Then I heard Andrew scream. I spun around. He was staring into the void, reaching out. "Mom? Mom, what are you doing here?" He started walking into the darkness. "Andrew, stop. There's nobody there." I looked at the car. For a split second, I saw Sarah and the kids sitting inside, waving at me. I blinked. The vision vanished. In their place were those things. My son, with his wings and his bleeding face, was staring at me from the wreckage. A sharp pain stabbed my brain. I fell to my knees, my ears ringing. Andrew's scream brought me back. I ran to him and punched him hard in the face. "Snap out of it! It's not your mom. It's the radiation or something worse." Then we heard the sound. Fast, heavy footsteps all around us. Something was circling us in the dark, making a strange, chattering noise. I swung the heavy pipe, hitting something solid. Something screeched and took flight. "Down! Get down the hatch!" I yelled at Andrew. I fumbled with my lighter. The flame caught, and right in front of me was a face, a pale, hairless, human-like head. No eyes, just black holes and bloody streaks. Vines of veins pulsed under its gray skin. I didn't think. I threw the pipe at its face and dived into the bunker, slamming the hatch shut. Something heavy pounded on the steel from the outside, over and over. Dust fell from the ceiling into my face. We sat there for 5 minutes until the pounding stopped. My heart was drumming against my ribs. I ripped off my mask. Andrew did the same. "I saw my house," he whispered. "My mom was making pancakes. It felt so real." "They use our memories against us," I said. "And they only move when there's light. They can't see us in the dark as well as we thought." I had managed to grab a small can of motor oil from the car. We went back to the room and I used a piece of my bag as a wick. The lamp glowed again. We ate some stale crackers and jerky I'd scavenged earlier. "Let's try that big door again," I said. We went back to the rusted crank. We shoved pipes into the wheel for leverage and pushed with everything we had. After 20 minutes of straining, the seal finally broke. The door groaned open. What we saw inside left us both speechless. We stepped into the room, our eyes wide, staring at the impossible. A week had passed. Life was getting worse by the hour. We hadn't crawled out of that hole since the last encounter. Nobody wanted to mess with those things in that God-forsaken darkness again. About a week ago, Andrew and I managed to pry open that heavy metal door I mentioned earlier. What we found behind it was the first bit of good luck we'd had in a long time. We couldn't open it all the way, just enough to squeeze through. I clicked my lighter, and the flame revealed a room frozen in time. Stale furniture, moldy walls, and a thick layer of dust. Then I saw them, a rack of rifles. 5 old Mausers were leaning against the wall. There were human remains on the floor, still wearing scraps of old military uniforms. On the tables, we found crates of ammo and some old detonators. Everything was rusted, but among the junk, we found a couple of rifles and some rounds that looked decent. We spent the next few days taking them apart and cleaning them. We managed to piece together 2 working rifles and about 15 rounds of ammo. A week in this bunker. I feel like my head is going to explode. The sound of dripping water is like a needle in my brain. Andrew and I look like cavemen. Overgrown, dirty, and scratching ourselves raw. But that's nothing compared to the hunger. The food is gone, the water ran out 2 days ago. We've been catching drips from the ceiling just to keep our throats from cracking. My stomach is in knots, and the weakness is starting to take over. We were sitting against the wall, listening to our stomachs growl. "Andrew, we have to move," I said. before we start looking at each other as a meal. Go where? To the surface? We don't even know where we are, Jack. He was right. This bunker was a trap, but we had no choice. Pack your things. We're going up. If we're gonna die, I'd rather do it out there than in this hole. I'm not planning on dying yet, Andrew smiled. You're the old man. I'm just a kid. I liked his spirit, even though I could see the terror behind that smile. We climbed out into the absolute void. Since the oil for the lamp was gone, our eyes had somewhat adjusted to the dark. I could see the mangled silhouette of my Ford and the endless black ceiling where the sky used to be. It was dead silent. Not even a breeze. Looks clear, I whispered. Let's head back toward the main road. Maybe it leads somewhere. We walked for 40 minutes. Suddenly, flashes of light started hitting my eyes. I got excited for a second, then realized it was just my brain short-circuiting. I'd blink and see green trees and sunshine. Then I'd blink again, and it was back to the abyss. I heard heavy breathing behind me. I turned around and saw Andrew had ripped off his gas mask. He was walking along like he was on a Sunday stroll. I lunged at him and shoved the mask back onto his face. Are you crazy? I hissed. He blinked, looking dazed. What? What happened? You took your mask off. It's the hallucinations. Don't let them win. We kept moving and saw them again. Creatures were darting through the trees around us. They moved like animals, erratic and fast. Then I heard a low growl from above. On a branch, right over our heads, a massive winged thing was perched. I couldn't see its body, but its eyes were glowing like dying embers in the dark. Andrew stood frozen. The thing started to climb down the trunk. The sound of dozens of footsteps surrounded us. Run, I yelled. We bolted. About 200 yards ahead, I saw the outline of a highway. We ran with everything we had, feeling the pack closing in behind us. Down the road, maybe half a mile away, I saw headlights. It was a bus. It wasn't moving. When we reached it and climbed inside, I stopped cold. The bus was full of corpses. It looked like an evacuation transport that never made it. Blood was everywhere. We slammed the door shut, and something heavy slammed into the roof. The winged creature had landed right above us. I realized right then. If we didn't fight, we were just going to be the next set of bodies on this bus. I leveled my rifle. Andrew did the same. I pulled the trigger. A dud. I racked the bolt and tried again. The pale things outside were getting closer, their white eyes reflecting the interior lights of the bus. Suddenly, Andrew's rifle roared. A horrific shriek erupted from the roof as the winged thing took off. Andrew kept firing like he was Rambo. The creatures outside scattered back into the woods. Silence fell again. We sat on the back seats, gasping for air. Then I heard a sound from the front of the bus. Someone was alive. An old man was coughing, trying to pull himself up from the floor. We ran to him. I turned off the headlights so we wouldn't attract more unwanted attention. The realization hit me hard. All those monsters out there. They used to be people. We grabbed a respirator from the dead driver and put it on the old man. Who are you? Where were you going? Is there any water? I asked. The old man just coughed, staring at us with hollow, terrified eyes. We needed to get him talking. He was our only link to what was left of the world. The situation was grim. The creatures had scattered, but they were still close. We had to be dead silent. One of them walked right up to the bus, sniffing and growling, but it couldn't see me in the absolute pitch black. It felt like they hunted more by sound and heat than sight. I managed to crawl to the back of the bus where the dead officers lay. My luck turned around. I found several handguns with spare magazines and tucked under a body a compact carbine. I also found a dosimeter. I didn't turn it on yet. I didn't want the beeping to bring the whole pack down on us. Andrew was trying to help the old man. The guy was coughing blood, and it was clear he didn't have much time left. "Jack, we need to move," Andrew whispered through his mask. "This guy won't last, and we need to know where this bus was heading." "I found gear," I whispered back. "Guns, ammo, and a dosimeter. I have a plan." I sat in the driver's seat. The controls were different from my Ford, but I could manage. "Ready?" I asked Andrew. He nodded, gripping the carbine. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the headlights on. Right in front of the bus stood about 10 of them. These were clearly human once. Some were still wearing jeans and jackets, but when the lights hit them, they went wild. One jumped onto the windshield. Up close, it was a nightmare. It had no eyes, no nose, no ears. Just a massive, gaping maw filled with rows of jagged teeth and black slime dripping from its jaws. I floored it. The bus lurched forward, crushing several creatures under the heavy wheels. Andrew started laying down cover fire, the flashes from the muzzle lighting up the chaos outside. "He's down!" Andrew yelled after a few shots. The thing on the windshield slid off and disappeared under the tires. We drove for 30 minutes until we saw the silhouette of a gas station. Andrew checked the dosimeter. The radiation levels are high, but manageable for a short stop. We need supplies. We pulled over. I grabbed a lighter and scouted the aisles. Most of the shelves were empty, but I found some chips, canned meat, and water. The old man finally woke up. He looked at us like we were demons. "Who are you?" he croaked. "Just people trying to survive." "Where was this bus going?" He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. "I'm a physicist. They were taking us to a secure facility, a train. They said there were accidents all over the world. But it wasn't an accident. The governments, they planned something, and it went wrong." The old man knew he was dying. "I don't want to suffer," he said, looking at the blood on his hands. "Tell me where the train is, then end it. Please." He told us about a railway hub in a city called Junction City. That's where the high-ranking officials and scientists were being gathered. Andrew didn't hesitate. He pulled his pistol and ended the old man's misery. Immediately, a shriek echoed from outside. The gunshot had acted like a dinner bell. "Jack, look." Andrew pointed at the window. The gas station was surrounded. Dozens of them were clawing at the glass. The dosimeter started screaming. The levels were spiking. "We need to break out, now!" I felt the panic rising. My vision blurred. Suddenly, I saw my son standing outside. Everything looked bright and warm for a second. "Jack, it's a hallucination, move!" Andrew grabbed my jacket and dragged me toward the bus. The thing I thought was my son was actually that winged nightmare, waiting for me to step into its reach. We scrambled back into the bus. Andrew did something crazy. He started throwing the bodies of the dead passengers out the door. The creatures swarmed the corpses, tearing into them. It gave us the opening we needed. I slammed the bus into gear and we tore away from the station. The dosimeter quieted down to a low, rhythmic click. "We're heading for Junction City," I said, gripping the wheel. "We're out of filters and almost out of ammo, Jack." "Then we better find that train. It's our only shot left." We drove into the endless night. 2 shadows in a dying world, heading toward a ghost of a hope. The road to Junction City felt like a journey through purgatory. The bus was rattling, and every mile felt like a victory against the darkness. We were at our breaking point, both us and the bus. Andrew was quiet, staring out of the shattered window into the void. We finally reached the outskirts of the city. In the distance, through the thick radioactive fog, I saw it. The railway hub the old man had mentioned in Junction City. The headlights of the bus caught the glint of steel tracks. A massive locomotive was idling there, steam or smoke rising into the black sky. "We made it, Andrew," I said, my voice cracking from dehydration. He didn't answer. I pulled the bus to a stop, right near the platform. "Andrew, hey, wake up, we're here." I reached over to shake his shoulder, and my heart stopped. He was cold. His respirator was still on, but his eyes were fixed on nothing. I checked for a pulse, but there was only silence. The radiation, the stress. It had finally taken him. The kid who had kept me sane was gone, just like everyone else. I couldn't even cry. I was too empty for tears. I left Andrew in the bus, giving him one last look before stepping out onto the platform. The dosimeter was ticking a slow, funeral rhythm. I walked toward the train. I expected soldiers, scientists, maybe a chance at a new life. But as I climbed into the first carriage, I saw the truth. It wasn't a rescue. The train was full of the same pale, eyeless creatures I'd fought on the road. They weren't attacking. They were just sitting there, waiting, like they were passengers on a trip to the end of time. The world started to spin. The blackness of the sky seemed to leak into my eyes. I fell to the floor of the train, the cold metal pressing against my cheek. I heard a voice. It sounded like Sarah. "Jack, Jack, can you hear me?" The darkness shattered like glass. I blinked, and the stinging smell of antiseptic hit my nose. Fluorescent lights blinded me. I wasn't in a bunker. I wasn't on a ghost train. I was in a hospital bed in a town called Clarion. Sarah was sitting next to me, her eyes red from crying. "Oh God, Jack, you're awake." I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. The sky? The creatures? She grabbed my hand. "It was an accident, honey, a month ago, on the way back from the lake. A truck hit us. You've been in a coma." I looked around the clean, bright room. The sun was shining through the window. The kids were in the hallway, laughing. Everything was normal. The apocalypse, the copper taste of radiation, the winged monsters. It was all a dream. A long, horrific nightmare born from a fractured mind. But as I lay there listening to the machine's beep, I felt something. I looked at the bedside table. There, among the flowers and cards, was a small, dirty scrap of a bag. And on my palm, there was a faint, fading mark. The kind you get from gripping a heavy iron pipe too hard. Sarah told me the doctor said I might have vivid dreams. But I remember Andrew. I remember his smile before it turned into terror. And sometimes when the room gets too quiet, I can still hear the rhythmic clicking of a dosimeter in the back of my head. The light is back for now, but I know how easily it can go out forever. Then a sharp, jarring snarl from the dosimeter ripped through my peaceful senses. I snapped my eyes open. Andrew was right there beside me. We were still on the bus. Nothing had changed. It was all just a dream. Or another hallucination. Honestly, I thought things would be a little better in Junction City, but I was wrong. We left the bus behind, took everything useful, and headed into the streets. The city didn't look like a normal settlement anymore. About 80% of the buildings were covered in some kind of glowing slime. It emitted a faint, sickly light that helped us see just enough to move. The dosimeter was acting crazy, beeping like a maniac 1 second and going silent the next. In the distance, we could hear screams that made my skin crawl. Every step was a struggle. Andrew was in bad shape. He'd vomited blood about 20 minutes ago. My own insides were burning, and the weakness was overwhelming. I collapsed near the wall of a building, gasping for air. Andrew sat down beside me. "How you doing, brother?" I managed to ask. "I think we're near the end, Jack," he muttered. "Don't talk like that. We have to find that station. Do you think they'll even help us? We're walking corpses soaked in radiation." "Maybe," Andrew said, his voice fading, "but we have to try." We checked our ammo. 1 magazine for the pistol and a few rounds for the rifle. Not much, but better than nothing. The dosimeter started beeping louder. We had to move. As we crept forward, Andrew suddenly froze. He was hugging the wall, staring around the corner. I peeked out and felt the blood drain from my face. The walls were moving. Not the buildings themselves, but something on them. A massive creature, barely visible through the slime, was crawling above us. And below, smaller things were scurrying in the shadows. Suddenly, a loud shriek tore through the air. The creature sprinted toward us. "Freeze! Don't move!" Andrew yelled. I stood perfectly still, not even breathing. About 15 of them surrounded us, but they didn't attack. They were just there, moving right next to us. Up close, they were nightmare fuel, distorted humans with extra limbs, or no limbs at all, crawling like worms. Their eyes glowed with tiny, cold white dots. After a few tense minutes, they all took off in the opposite direction. Then, the massive thing on the wall moved past us. It looked like a giant spider made of hundreds of human bodies. Arms, legs, and heads fused together into a living, twitching mass. It left a trail of that glowing slime behind it. Once they were gone, we practically collapsed from the tension. "Why didn't they touch us?" I asked, trembling. "Maybe because we're already half dead, Jack. We probably smell like uranium." We kept moving, avoiding the puddles of slime. The city was a graveyard of abandoned cars and corpses. Suddenly, a chunk of that glowing slime fell from a roof, landing right on Andrew's shoulder. It started smoking immediately. The stuff was corrosive. Andrew screamed in agony as it burned through his suit and into his skin. "Shut up. You'll call them back," I hissed, trying to scrape the burning goo off him. The ground started to tremble. The spider mass was coming back. Lured by the noise, I grabbed Andrew and practically carried him. We ducked into a massive building, a fire station. I slammed the heavy metal door shut just as something slammed into the other side. Andrew fired his pistol through the door until he passed out from the pain and exhaustion. Inside the fire station, I found some newer gas masks, filters, and fireproof suits. I dragged Andrew into a fire truck and changed his mask. I managed to find a map in the glove box. Junction City was a maze, but the railway hub wasn't too far now. I scouted the second floor and found a flashlight. It was a small win, but I'll take it. Andrew is still unconscious. His pulse is weak, but he's breathing. I'm sitting here in the dark, looking at the map. Everything inside me is burning. I have to focus my eyes just to see the lines on the paper. This is it. The final push. We're either getting on that train at Junction City, or we're dying in this fire truck. I'm going to close my eyes for just an hour, then we move. I didn't sleep for an hour. My body wouldn't let me. Every time I drifted off, I felt the fire truck shaking, as if the heavy footsteps of those things outside were vibrating through the concrete floor. I checked on Andrew. I shook his shoulder, gently at first, then with desperation. "Andrew, kid, wake up. It's time." The station is just a few blocks away." He didn't move. I pulled back the sleeve of his suit and my heart sank. The dark purple splotches had reached his neck. I leaned in, pressing my ear to his mask. There was no ragged breath, no heartbeat, just a hollow, terrifying silence. Andrew was gone. He had died quietly in his sleep, while I was staring at a map that led to nowhere. I sat there in the cabin of that fire truck for a long time. I was alone. Truly, finally alone. I didn't cry. My throat was too dry, my body too depleted. I just grabbed the flashlight, the map, and the carbine. I didn't look back at him. I couldn't. I stepped out of the fire station into the glowing fog of Junction City. The walk was a nightmare. My vision was tunneling, flickering between the dark ruins and flashes of a world that used to be. I saw shadows moving on the rooftops, but they didn't drop down. They were just watching the last human voice in the city fade away. Finally, I saw the silhouette of the railway hub. A massive, dark shape sat on the tracks. A faint light shimmered through the haze. "The train," I rasped, coughing up something thick and metallic. I dragged my leaden legs over the gravel, crawling the last 50 yards to the platform. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and touched the cold steel of the locomotive. I clicked on the flashlight for one last look. The light flickered, fighting the darkness for a second, and reality hit me like a physical blow. There was no rescue train. There was only a rusted, burnt-out shell of a freight car that had been derailed for decades. The light I saw was just the bioluminescent slime coating the twisted iron. The steam was just the radioactive fog drifting through the broken skeletal roof of the station. The old man's sanctuary was a myth, a beautiful lie that kept us walking until the end. I slumped against the rusted wheel. I pulled out my notebook, my fingers barely able to grip the pen. "My name is Jack," I wrote, the letters jagged and uneven. "I made it to the station. Andrew died in the fire truck. There is no train. Sarah, kids, I'm coming to see you now." I leaned my head back against the cold iron. The copper taste was overwhelming. I closed my eyes, and for a fleeting moment, I felt the warmth of a sun that had been dead for a month. The notebook slipped from my hand, falling into the gray ash. The silence was finally complete. If you like the story, please support the channel with a like and a subscription. See you soon. I don't even know where to start this disturbing story. What happened that night doesn't fit into any logical box. Since then, my hair has turned gray. Don't be surprised. Even though I'm only 24, I look like an old man now. That night left a mark on me that will stay until my dying day. It all started on that ill-fated evening when I was standing at the station with my bags, buying a ticket to Little Rock, Arkansas. The station was nearly empty, and outside a bitter wind was howling, biting through my clothes. I didn't want to go, but I had to. My grandmother lived there, and she'd passed away a week ago from a heart condition. I hadn't seen her in 3 years, and suddenly the neighbors called to give me the news. I'm her only heir, so I had to go claim her old, run-down place on the outskirts of the city. To keep it short, I bought the ticket and walked out onto the platform. My train was already waiting. There weren't many people, maybe 10 in total. Trains have been a part of my life since I was a kid. My mom worked for Amtrak her whole life as a lead attendant. I used to travel with her on long routes all the time. I loved the sound of the wheels, the smell of the upholstery, and the quiet buzz of the cafe car, where she'd sometimes let me hang out while she managed the inventory. My mom raised me alone. She couldn't leave me at home for a week at a time while she was on the cross-country lines, so I lived on the rails with her. But that's also where it ended. I was 17 when it happened. According to the police and witnesses, it was a freak accident. She was boarding the car as it started to pull away. The train suddenly jerked. She lost her footing, and she fell right into the gap. The wheels cut her clean in half. A horrific death. Now, every time I step into a coach car, I think of her. That night was no different. I found my seat, number 21. The car was almost empty, and as soon as I sat down, we pulled out. I was glad for the quiet. At least I wouldn't have to deal with snoring strangers or loud tourists. I wasn't sleepy because I'd had too much coffee at the station. I just stared out the window at the black silhouettes of trees flying by. About 20 minutes later, a young attendant came through to check tickets and offered a complimentary snack. After she left, I grabbed a cigarette and stumbled toward the vestibule between cars, looking for a place to step off or just a bit of air. On the way, I saw that the door to the next car was wide open. I looked inside and realized the car was pitch black. No lights at all. I thought it was strange. Why would they hitch an empty, dark car to a night train? As I flicked my lighter, I saw a figure near the restroom area. It darted into the darkness so fast I barely caught it. I figured it was just a crew member checking the locks in the dark, so I went back. The lights in our car were so dim they might as well have been off. I was starting to drift off when the attendant came back and shook me awake. "Don't sleep, sir," she said, her voice sharp and surprisingly aggressive. I asked why, and she just whispered, "You can't sleep now, not here. We have to pass a certain stretch of track first. Just wait until we're through the dry flats." She looked terrified, her hands shaking as she adjusted her vest. I asked her about the dark car behind us, and she just snapped, "No one should be back there," and hurried away. Her behavior was completely different from when I first boarded. She went to the other passengers, whispering the same warning, but nobody took her seriously. I should have. I eventually fell asleep. I woke up about 3 hours later. The car was no longer empty. It was packed with figures in every seat. It was dead quiet, except for the wind and the wheels. I looked at the person in the seat across from me. He was curled in a ball, whispering something to the wall. Then he turned toward me, and my heart stopped. His upper body rotated, but his legs stayed glued to the seat, twisted like a broken toy. The fabric beneath him began to turn bright red with blood. He looked like a man, but I could feel he was a corpse. I bolted into the aisle and saw the true horror. An old woman a few rows up was spinning in circles, not on the floor, but hovering just above her seat, rotating rapidly under her coat. Another man had his mouth open so wide it looked like his jaw had been unhinged. No living human could open their mouth that far. The air turned cold, and the car itself began to transform. The walls started to rust and peel right before my eyes. The sleek panels were cracking and curling up. And then at the far end of the car, I saw it. It looked like a person, but it wasn't. It was naked, bone-thin and tall. Its neck was twisted 90 degrees to the side, and its nose was almost gone, just a tiny slit. But the hands? Each hand had 4 fingers, each nearly 2 feet long, dragging on the floor like skeletal claws. I slapped myself, screaming internally for it to be a dream, but it was reality. The creature covered the entire length of the car in a split second. It leaped at the glass door of the vestibule, pressing those long, spindly fingers against the pane, staring at me like I was nothing but meat. The thing started smashing the glass and trying to claw its way under the door. I didn't wait. I grabbed the emergency brake handle. The wheels screeched, and as the train slowed, I forced the side door open and leaped out into the dark Arkansas plains. I hit the ground hard, bruising my legs. But I didn't care about my bags. I ran into the brush. I must have run for 20 minutes before I collapsed. I woke up the next morning to an old man poking me with the barrel of a Remington. "Hey kid, you can't be sleeping here," he said. He was wearing tattered hunting gear and had a hawk perched on his shoulder. I told him I'd jumped from the train. He looked at me solemnly and asked, "Did you see the skinwalkers?" I just nodded. "Follow me," he said. "This is a bad stretch of land. They've been here for a long time. You can't sleep in these parts. Not in a house, not on a train, and definitely not on the ground. They prey on the sleepers because their will is weak. A few days ago, they took Piano Pete from the trailer park down the road. He had long fingers. You should have seen him. My blood ran cold. That was the creature I saw. Pete used to love watching the trains pass. The old man, Miller, took me to his shack and gave me some moonshine and salt pork. "You can sleep for an hour now," he said. "The sun is up. They only hunt in the dark. I'll watch the door." I laid down on his old spring bed and finally closed my eyes, but I knew I'd never truly rest again. I woke up to old man Miller shaking my shoulder. "Rise and shine, kid. The sun's high, and you need to move if you want to make it to the city in one piece," he rumbled. I sat up on the creaky spring bed, my head throbbing, and a foul aftertaste of that moonshine in my mouth. Memories of the night before hit me, and I shuddered. "Miller, what the hell was that on the train? Those things with the fingers?" I asked, praying it was just some bad trip. Miller sat down on a wooden stool and lit a hand-rolled cigarette. "Those, son, are the ones who fell asleep at the wrong time. This land, it's got a history. They say there were labor camps here way back. A lot of angry, restless souls buried in this dirt. Something opened up. Now, if you sleep here and your will is weak, they come for you. They take your soul and rewrite your body. You saw Pete, didn't you? Piano Pete. He got caught just like that. Now he wanders the tracks, clicking those fingers against windows, looking for anyone else whose eyes might be heavy. How many of them are there?" I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "Enough to make sure you're never safe. Just remember, as long as the sun is up, they're hiding in the shadows. Old mine shafts, cellars, crawl spaces. And once twilight hits, don't you dare close your eyes. I've got a stash of strong coffee here. Take it. The station is about 9 miles through the woods. If you make it before dark, you can catch the freight heading out. The crew on that line knows how to punch through this stretch of track." I gathered my things, and Miller shoved an old folding knife into my pocket. "For peace of mind," he winked. I stepped out of the shack. The woods looked normal, birds chirping, sun beating down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that behind every oak tree, something was waiting for me to just blink a second too long. The hike was brutal. My legs were aching from the jump off the Amtrak, and fear was the only thing keeping me moving. About an hour in, I hit an old rusted spur line. And that's when I saw him. Sitting on a rusted rail was Pete. In the daylight, he looked even worse. His skin was gray, stretched tight over bone, and his fingers, long, jointed, impossible, were slowly tapping the grass like he was playing an invisible Steinway. He didn't see me, or he pretended not to. I froze, afraid to even breathe. Suddenly, his twisted neck snapped 90 degrees in my direction. There were no eyes, just empty sockets filled with black sludge. He made a sound like metal scraping glass and started to stand up. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I bolted, tearing through the brush, not even looking where I was going. Behind me, I could hear that horrific clack-clack, his fingers hitting each other as he moved. I burst into a clearing and saw the station. a derelict brick building with a single flickering light. And there, thank God, was a freight train idling. The engineer was already blowing the whistle. I lunged for the ladder of the last car just as the train lurched forward. Looking back at the edge of the tree line, I saw him. Pete was standing there watching the train leave, his long fingers moving in a slow, rhythmic wave. The car smelled of grain and dust. I huddled in the corner, my whole body shaking. "Don't sleep, don't sleep," I whispered to myself. Little Rock was close, but the ride felt like an eternity. Now I know for sure. In some places, sleep isn't rest. It's a death sentence. If you ever find yourself passing through the dry flats or these backwoods, drink coffee. Lots of it. And never, ever close your eyes. The train rhythmically thudded over the rail joints. I was huddled in the corner of a freight car, my hand white-knuckled around the folding knife Old Man Miller had given me. Sleep was a heavy shroud trying to pull me under. But I knew that if I let it take me, I'd never wake up again. I pulled out my thermos, shaking out the last drops of bitter cold coffee. It barely touched the exhaustion. The car was filled with mounds of grain that shifted and hissed every time the train swayed. And then I heard a different sound. A rustle that didn't belong to me. Out of the pitch-black corners of the car, shapes began to form. At first, I thought they were just bags of grain, but bags don't breathe. They were people, or what was left of them. They sat motionless, chins tucked to their chests. I froze. One of them slowly lifted its head. Its face was pale as chalk, and where the eyes should have been, there were only twin voids of black sludge. It didn't attack. It just watched. That's when it hit me. They were all asleep. But not a normal sleep. They were trapped inside the nightmare, their bodies hollowed out and possessed. "Are you still up?" A soft wheezing whisper hissed through the car. It was Piano Pete. I saw those impossibly long, four-jointed fingers slide through the gap in the heavy steel door. He didn't come in. He just ran his claws along the metal frame, tapping it like he was playing a grand piano. Soon you'll close your eyes too, and then we'll be family," he croaked. I lunged forward with Miller's knife and slashed at those fingers. There was no scream, only a sound like air escaping a punctured tire. The hand snapped back into the night. The train began to hiss and slow down. We were approaching the freight yards on the outskirts of Little Rock. Lights, blessed electric street lights, started flickering past the door, but the shadows inside the car were rising. They reached for me, their whispers growing into a deafening roar in my head. I threw myself at the door, slid it open, and tumbled out onto the gravel of the yard. I ran until my lungs felt like they were filled with glass, not stopping until I collapsed in the bright neon glow of a 24-hour diner. When I woke up in the county hospital, the sun was blindingly bright. The doctors talked about acute sleep deprivation and psychotic breaks brought on by exhaustion. I tried to tell them about Pete, about the skinwalkers on the train, about Old Man Miller. They just nodded with that look of professional pity. To them, I was just a kid who'd had a breakdown on the rails. But when I looked at my palm, I saw it. A faint, bruised imprint of a long, thin finger. A mark. Like I'd been tagged for later. Now I live in the city. I never turn off the lights. I took a job working the graveyard shift at a warehouse, and I only sleep during the day when the sun is at its peak. I know they're still out there stalking that stretch of the Amtrak line. Sometimes when the city noise dies down, I hear it. A faint, rhythmic on my window pane. It's Pete, playing his melody, waiting for the one night I'm too tired to keep my eyes open. Months had passed since I escaped that ghost train. I thought the city would be my sanctuary, that the neon lights of Little Rock and the constant hum of traffic would act as a shield. I was wrong. The creatures didn't stay behind on the tracks. They followed the scent of my fear. I started seeing them everywhere. In the reflections of store windows on Main Street, in the shadows of the subway tunnels, in the empty hallways of my office building. They weren't rushing. They were just waiting for me to hit my breaking point. One night, I stumbled back to my apartment after a double shift at the warehouse. I hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours. My eyes felt like they were filled with hot sand. I bolted every lock, drew the blackout curtains, and flipped on every lamp in the place. I sat on my couch, gripping a mug of black coffee, my knuckles white. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice, and then pitch black. The whole block had gone dark. In the dead silence of the apartment, I heard it. It wasn't outside. It was coming from the hallway, right inside my door. I reached for Miller's folding knife. "Get out! I'm awake! You hear me? I'm still awake!" I screamed into the void. But the only response was a soft, wheezing laugh. A figure stepped out of the gloom. But it wasn't Piano Pete. It was a woman in an old Amtrak uniform. My mother. Her face was exactly as it appeared in my nightmares. Torn clean down the middle and stitched back together with jagged, rusty wire. Her eyes were nothing but bottomless pits of oil. "Baby, you're so tired," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "Just close your eyes. Mama's here. We're all here." Behind her, dozens of shadows surged. Pete, the passengers from the coach car, the lost souls from the dry flats, all of them reaching out with those grotesque, four-jointed fingers. I realized then that this curse wasn't a place. It was a choice. They were the ones who had simply given up. Right then, Old Man Miller's words about Will finally made sense. I didn't try to fight them with the knife. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to focus. I visualized a white-hot light, a roar of pure defiance, a fire that they couldn't touch. I screamed with everything I had left, pouring all my rage and will to live into one single shout. When I opened my eyes, the power was back on. The apartment was flooded with light. The things were gone, but the wallpaper was shredded with deep, jagged claw marks. I realized running was over. I couldn't be the prey anymore. I had to be the hunter. I sought out others, people like me who had seen the long fingers and survived. We formed a group. We don't sleep at night. We patrol the streets, watching over the exhausted, the homeless, the night shift workers, anyone on the verge of nodding off. We call ourselves the Watchmen. If you're walking home late at night and you see someone with a thermos and eyes that look like they've seen the end of the world, that's one of us. We guard the border while you sleep. But remember, never let your guard down. Because they are always there, just out of sight. And they really, really want you to just take a nap. spent that entire day lost in CS2. Gunshots thundering in my headset, enemies flickering on the screen, fingers clicking keys like a machine. It was that rhythm where you forget time exists. The world shrank to a glowing monitor, a crosshair. In flashes of light, I was in a 1 versus 2 clutch, rushing a site through a flashbang, and suddenly the screen flickered. Everything went dark. Monitor, router, desk lamp. The apartment was swallowed by shadows. Only the PC fan kept spinning for a second. By inertia. Are you kidding me? I slammed my mouse against the wall. It clattered and bounced into the corner. I was furious. The power cut out at the worst possible moment. Now what? I muttered. I got up, clicking on my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the room. Scattered socks, empty Monster cans, the clock on the wall. 1:13 a.m. I walked to the front door and opened it. The hallway was pitch black. I looked out the window. The neighboring houses in our Ohio suburb were dead. Not a single light. This wasn't just a tripped breaker. The whole district was gone. I opened Discord and messaged the guys. Power's out. No clue when it'll be back. They replied almost instantly. You ruined the match, man. Buy a damn UPS already. I sighed and locked the screen. Fine. Maybe it's a sign to sleep. Or my stomach growled, right? I hadn't eaten anything all day but chips. I walked into the kitchen. The flashlight beam swept the walls, catching the messy counters, a crumpled Doritos bag, a plate covered in crumbs, a sticky ring from a soda can. The fridge was silent. Its usual hum had died with the lights. Then, a smell hit me, pungent, rotting, like something had crawled under the floorboards and died. I winced in disgust as the light hit the cutting board. There it was, the chicken I'd taken out this morning. I meant to fry it, but I forgot. I played CS all day instead. The meat was covered in a slimy film. The edges were dark. The stench clung to my throat. I grabbed a trash bag, shoved the chicken inside, trying not to touch it. Then everything else followed. Empty cans, pizza crust, crushed cigarette packs. I tied the knot tight and headed to the hallway. Suddenly, my grandmother's voice echoed in my head. A memory from childhood. Don't take the trash out at night, boy. You'll invite misery into the house. I smirked, shaking my head. Grandma was always so superstitious. I threw on my old jacket, the one with the broken zipper, shoved my phone in my pocket, and clutching the stinking bag, I stepped out. The hallway was quiet. The elevator was dead, of course. My flashlight trembled, illuminating patches of dirty gray walls and concrete steps. The longer the light danced on the empty stairs, the more the cold crawled under my skin. It felt like the house was listening to my steps, holding its breath with me. I hurried outside. The wind hit me like a physical blow. I shivered, pulling my jacket closed. The streetlights were dark. The playground looked like a graveyard for toys. The swings creaked in the wind. I froze. Something crunched in the dark. I thought it was a stray cat. But the sound repeated. Thud, drag, thud. Steps. Strange, messy, excessively heavy steps. And they were getting closer. Then through the wind, a faint whistle. A light, careless melody, like someone was whistling right under your nose. It sounded so wrong in a dead yard. Screw this, I hissed. My heart dropped into my stomach. The smell from the bag got worse. In a panic, I threw it toward the bins and ran back to the door. I fumbled with my key fob. Nothing. lock didn't click. Come on, come on. The whistling stopped. Whoever was there had gone silent. I slammed the key against the panel again. Finally, the lock clicked. I yanked the door open, and a voice spoke right behind me. "Hey, neighbor. What are you doing out here?" I turned around, slowly. My heart was hammering against my ribs. In the pale moonlight stood a familiar figure. Chad, the guy from the 3rd floor. He was in a suit, no tie, swaying, smiling like an idiot. He smelled like a brewery. "Chad, damn it, you nearly gave me a heart attack." "Just not coming back from a party," he slurred. "You out for a walk?" "No, just the trash." Chad squinted at my empty hands. "Trash? So where is it? Why are you empty-handed?" I dropped it," I admitted, feeling the heat in my face. "Going back for it now." "Good luck," he chuckled. Then he turned serious. "Though, they say you shouldn't take the trash out at night. Bad omen, haven't you heard?" Yeah, whatever. Go home, Chad." I walked back to the bins. I felt like a coward, scared of a drunk neighbor. I reached the rusty containers, lifted the lid, and then a sound sliced the air. A long, loud groan of relief. I froze. My flashlight beam jumped and stopped on the edge of the bin. There was a hand, pale, with long, filthy nails. The fingers clutched the metal, trying to pull something up. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. I expected a homeless person to pop out, but nothing happened. The hand hung there, fingers twitching, grabbing the air, and then, from inside, a woman's voice, like the creak of a rotting door. "My food." The hand moved. It pulled itself up, and I realized it was detached. It was a limb, severed at the elbow, skin hanging in rags, rotten flesh. My flashlight shook as other parts began to crawl out. A leg, with a jagged bone sticking out, then a torso in shredded clothes. The ribcage was creaking like wood in a storm. They weren't just falling out, they were crawling toward each other, merging, like someone was building a doll out of broken parts. But it was wrong. A leg growing from a shoulder, arms sprouting from the stomach, joints grinding. Last came the head. The thing held it in its hand like a trophy, a woman, black tangled hair, one eye hanging from a socket, her mouth twisted into a rotten grin. It stood up, swaying. "My food." I started running. I didn't look back. I heard the thuds behind me, heavy, uneven, like parts were falling off and snapping back on mid-run. I made it inside. I locked the door. I barricaded it with a chair. Silence. And then the microwave. The power was back. I felt safe for a second. Until I looked at my hand. I was still holding the trash bag. I opened the balcony door and shoved it outside to keep the stench out. I looked down. The yard was empty, quiet. I went to the kitchen to make tea. My hands were finally stopping their shake. The sound was coming from the balcony. I walked over. I pulled the curtain back. IT was there, pressed against the glass. That thing, stitched together from meat and madness. It slammed its head against the door. The plastic frame began to crack. I bolted. I ran into the hallway screaming for help. I pounded on Chad's door. "Chad, open up, please!" I heard footsteps inside, the rattle of a chain. He didn't open. He locked it further. No one opened. The whole building stood in silence, listening to my terror. From the stairs above, that voice again.
My food.
I tripped. The world flipped upside down, pain flared, and then darkness. I woke up in a hospital, white walls, the smell of bleach. I tried to move, but something was different. My right leg was gone. I screamed until they sedated me. 2 days later, a detective came, Detective Miller. "We found you unconscious," he said, his voice heavy. "And we saw it over you, eating." I gasped. "You saw it?" "We shot at it. It didn't care. It jumped out the window and vanished by the bins. 10 years ago, a man in your building killed his wife, dissected her, put her in trash bags." He looked at me with pity. "Maybe she's just finishing her trip to the bins." I looked at the window. For a split second, I saw a face, a pale, dead face with one eye. I blinked. It was just a shadow. Was that just a shadow? If you like the story, please support the channel with a like and a subscription. See you soon.